The hallway was dark except for the slice of amber light spilling from the staircase, and her fingers closed around my wrist before I could take another step.
"Wait till they go upstairs,"
she said. Her voice was low, steady, and somehow more unsettling because it didn't tremble. Behind us, the dining room still carried the after-sounds of family dinner. Plates being stacked, somebody laughing too loudly, Grace arguing with her brother over some movie from 10 years ago. But here, in the narrow space between the front room and the stairs, the house felt sealed off from the rest of the world. Liliana Mendoza, my girlfriend's mother, didn't look flirtatious. She looked cornered. That was worse. I stood still, every instinct pulling in a different direction. The dark paneled wall was cool against my shoulder. Her hand was warm, but not lingering, not intimate, purposeful. She was wearing a pale satin robe over black slacks and a silk shell, like she'd changed out of her blazer after a brutal day but never really left work behind. One loose strand had fallen from her pinned-up hair, and she looked tired in a way expensive lighting couldn't hide. Upstairs, a bedroom door clicked shut. She released my wrist. "Good," she murmured. "Now listen carefully." I should have walked away. I know that's the line everybody expects me to say, and I mean it. At 29, I was old enough to understand disaster when it was standing directly in front of me. And I had already spent 8 months dating Grace, long enough to know her family operated on polished surfaces and buried tension. But Liliana wasn't looking at me like a woman about to cross a line. She was looking at me like I was the only person left in the house she could trust. "I need your help," she said. I frowned. With what? With something that cannot be discussed in front of Grace. That made my stomach drop harder than her hand on my wrist ever could. "I'm not sure that sentence leads anywhere healthy." "It doesn't," she said. "It leads somewhere necessary." Then she turned toward the shadow of her study and added, "Come with me for 5 minutes. If you still think I'm out of line, you can leave." You ever have a moment where the room itself feels like it's warning you? Where the air seems to say, whatever choice you make right now is going to cost you something. That was one of those moments, and I followed her anyway. Her study smelled like paper, lavender, and cold coffee. A banker's lamp cast a circle of green light over the desk, where an open laptop sat beside 2 legal pads and a printed packet of emails clipped together in a hurry. This was not a seduction scene. This was triage. Liliana closed the door softly, then stayed on her side of the room. "I found out this afternoon," she said. "Grace's father is filing to reopen the sale terms on the company." That got my attention fast. Grace had mentioned the company before, always vaguely. Her mother ran a boutique corporate wellness firm in Chicago. Her father had helped build it, then left years ago, both from the marriage and eventually from the board. I knew there'd been legal cleanup after the divorce. I hadn't known it was the kind that came back from the dead. "You can do that?" I asked. "Not legally, if the original transfer documents are intact, but someone has accessed archived files." She met my eyes. Someone forwarded internal correspondence to his attorney. "And you think it was Grace?" "No." The answer came immediately. "I think it came through Grace." That was somehow even worse. I stepped closer to the desk and scanned the top page. It was technical enough to make most people's eyes glaze over. Document retrieval logs, archived transfer packets, attorney names, access timestamps. It looked like boring paperwork, which is how serious damage usually arrives. "I don't understand why you're asking me," I said. "You work in cybersecurity." I looked up. She gave a tired, humorless smile. "Grace talks, Theo, more than she realizes. I know what you do. I know you're very good at it. And I know if I call one of my own people tonight, this will be all over the office by morning." There it was, the real reason for the hallway. Not secrecy for its own sake. Controlled damage. I rubbed the back of my neck and looked at the timestamps again. "What exactly are you asking?" "I want to know whether someone used Grace's old employee credentials, her devices, or her access trail to get to me." Her voice stayed even, but I saw the strain in the way she folded her hands too tightly. and I need to know before I accuse the wrong person. I leaned against the edge of the desk and thought it through. This was already bad. Grace's father, Victor, had a reputation even from the little I knew. Polished, charming, and patient in the way dangerous men often are when they believe the world owes them a correction. If he'd found a way back into company records, he wasn't fishing. He was aiming. And if Grace had unknowingly given him a path, I exhaled slowly. Does Grace know anything? No. Does she know you're worried? She thinks I've been distracted. I glanced toward the door. And you want to keep it that way? I want to protect my daughter until I know whether she needs protecting from a stranger or from her own father. That line settled in the room and stayed there. I nodded once. All right. Liliana's shoulders dropped by a fraction. Not relief exactly, more like somebody setting down a box that had been cutting into their hands. But, I added, I'm putting a boundary on this now. She went still. I help you find the leak. I help you secure the records. I do not lie to Grace if she asks me directly. And if I find out she's in real danger, she gets told immediately. Liliana held my gaze for a long second. Then she nodded. Fair. That was our first alliance. Not romantic. Not yet. Just two tired adults standing over paperwork in the middle of a family house, trying to stop a quiet disaster before it spread. I went back to my apartment at 11:30 and barely slept. By 9 the next morning, I was in Liliana's downtown office with a loaner badge clipped to my jacket and a coffee I hadn't touched. Her assistant, Maria, met me in the elevator lobby and gave me one long, sharp look. So you're the boyfriend. I winced. Great. Starting there. I start where the mess is. She handed me a folder. She's in Conference B. She hasn't eaten. She's pretending she has. I already like you. Most competent people do. Maria was in her 30s, fast-moving, immaculate, and clearly the kind of assistant who actually ran the building while everyone else put their names on slides. She walked me down the glass corridor and lowered her voice. He called this morning, she said. Victor? She nodded. Asked for a courtesy meeting. That means he knows, she knows. I blew out a breath. Perfect. That's not the word I'd use. Conference B looked out over gray spring Chicago, all steel, lake light, and low clouds. Liliana was standing at the far end of the table in a charcoal suit, reading from her phone with the kind of stillness people mistake for calm. She looked up when I came in, and I caught the briefest flicker in her expression. Tension, yes, but also something warmer. Trust. Too early, maybe, but real. Thank you for coming, she said. You made it sound like a fire. It is, just with better stationery. That almost got a smile out of me. I set my laptop down and got to work. Grace's old access had technically been revoked after her internship, but old organizations are full of stupid habits. Shared credentials, legacy permissions, forgotten cloud folders, dead people in systems still getting invited to meetings by auto-populated lists. The illusion of order is one of my least favorite American industries. An hour in, I found it. Not a full credential. Not even a successful login under Grace's name. But there had been repeated password recovery attempts linked to an old archive platform, each routed through an email account that had once been connected to Grace's employee profile. From there, somebody had used a vendor-side support loophole to request document restoration metadata. No smoking gun, but enough to map the vault. Victor hadn't broken in through a front door. He'd traced the outline and pressured the hinges. I turned my screen toward Liliana. There. She leaned in. Her perfume was subtle, clean, expensive, not sweet. The kind of detail you notice once and then get annoyed at yourself for noticing twice. Can you stop it? Yes. I clicked through another screen. But that's the easy part. What's the hard part? I looked up at her. Figuring out who inside the company gave him the map. Her face changed. Not dramatically, just sharpened. Someone inside? He didn't guess this chain. Somebody pointed him toward the right old platform. She went quiet, arms folded, gaze on the screen, but mind somewhere further ahead. I'd seen that look before on executives and litigators, the moment they start mentally redrawing the room and everyone inside it. Who knows the archive structure? I asked. 3 current staff, 2 outside counsel, 1 former board consultant. She paused. And Grace. I watched her say her daughter's name and understood something all at once. This wasn't just business to her. It wasn't even just betrayal. It was motherhood being turned into a vulnerability vector. I hated Victor on sight, and I wasn't even in the same room with him. For the next few days, that office became our war room. Not literally. No shouting, no dramatic threats, no folders slapped on tables. Real fights over money and records are quieter than people think. They happen in call logs, restore requests, calendar invites, and who leaves the room first after a lawyer says, to clarify. I locked down the archive pathways, restructured the vendor permissions, pulled access trails, and built a clean timeline of every recovery attempt. Maria became my best ally by day 2, mostly because she hated Victor and admired competence in roughly equal measure. Grace, meanwhile, kept texting me normal things. Can you do dinner Friday? Mom is being impossible again. Did I leave my blue sweater at your place? Every message felt heavier than it should have. I wasn't lying to her exactly, but I was standing too close to a secret that involved both of us, and every day I delayed telling her felt like another notch cut into something I wouldn't be able to repair cleanly later. Liliana knew it too. That became clear on the 4th night, when we were alone in the office past 9 and the skyline outside had gone black and gold. You should tell her something, she said quietly. I looked up from the log summary. Something? That I retained you for a security review. That won't stay small. No. She closed her laptop. But it may stay cleaner than this. I leaned back in my chair and studied her. The overhead lights had softened to night mode. Her hair was down now, shoulders a little slumped. The first 2 signs of exhaustion I'd seen all day. There was a container of untouched soup near her elbow. You haven't eaten, I said. She blinked once. That's not what we're discussing. It is now. Theo. No. You don't get to outwork a nervous system. A look crossed her face then. Annoyance first, then reluctant amusement. That was suspiciously specific. I'm good at my job. That isn't your job. I stood, grabbed the soup, and moved toward the break room. Temporary reassignment. Behind me, I heard her laugh softly, and that sound did something inconvenient to the center of my chest. When I came back 2 minutes later with the soup heated and a spoon, she didn't argue. She just looked at the bowl, then at me. You do this a lot? She asked. Fix practical things before they get worse? Yes. Pretty much. She took the spoon. That must make you insufferable. Only to disorganized people. That actually got a full smile out of her. Brief, but real. And that was the problem. Not lust. Not some reckless physical magnetism. That would have been easier to condemn and easier to control. What kept building between us was worse. Respect, timing, observation, care, the clean stuff, the dangerous stuff. I started noticing too much. The way she rubbed her temple when she was angry, but went completely still when she was scared. The way she always answered calls from staff on the first ring no matter how tired she was. The way she stood straighter when challenged, as if other people's disrespect triggered posture instead of collapse. Once you start admiring someone's character in detail, you're already halfway ruined. The break came on a Wednesday. Victor requested an in-person meeting. Liliana said yes, but only if counsel was present. He agreed, which meant he was confident. I sat in on the prep, then stayed in the adjacent office during the actual meeting because that was the ethical line we'd drawn. I couldn't be her boyfriend's proxy and her private weapon at the same table, even I knew that. But through the thin glass and lowered voices, I heard enough. Victor was smooth, too smooth. He framed everything as concern, oversight, historical clarity. The usual language men use when they want to reopen old wounds while sounding civilized. Then he made his actual move. If Liliana wanted to avoid public review of the asset transfer, she could agree to temporary board supervision while the archive irregularities were examined. In other words, step down without saying the words. When she came into the side office afterward, she shut the door harder than necessary. Well, I asked. He wants me to look guilty in exchange for looking graceful. I stood slowly. That's a no, then. It is a violent no. Good. She laughed once, then put both hands on the edge of the credenza and bowed her head. That was the first time I saw the cost of all her composure. I stepped closer, then stopped myself. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for one suspended second, all the unsaid things in that room became almost unbearable. Not because we were about to do something reckless, because we both knew exactly why we wouldn't. I can end this, I said quietly. Not elegantly, but clean enough. How? By going public first. She straightened. With what? With the security findings, the vendor loophole, the attempted archive restoration, the internal contact who fed him the platform. I have enough to make his version of events look like what it is. Her gaze sharpened. Who inside? I handed her the page. When she read the name, her face lost all color. Not Grace. Worse. Hannah. Grace's closest friend from college. Former intern. Frequent visitor. Trusted enough to be invisible. Liliana sat down slowly. It made sense all at once. Hannah had still had limited vendor contact from an old consulting role. Hannah still came by family events. Hannah was exactly the kind of person Victor could charm into believing she was helping restore fairness. Grace will be devastated, Liliana said. I nodded. She adores that girl. I know. And if I expose this, it drags Grace directly into the center of it. Yes. Silence. Then Liliana looked at me with a levelness that made my throat tighten. You're right, she said. Do it. That was the midpoint. The shift. The moment this stopped being about quiet containment and became about choosing truth, that cost. Grace found out the next day, not from gossip, from me. I drove to her apartment after work, sat with her at her kitchen table and told her everything cleanly. No evasions, no soft focus, just facts in order. She cried. Then she got angry. Then she asked whether I had feelings for her mother. That was the question I'd feared, because it deserved honesty, and honesty was going to hurt her no matter how carefully I carried it. I have respect for her, I said, more than I realized. And enough that I should not keep pretending this relationship with you is untouched by what's happened. Grace stared at me for a long time. Then she nodded once, tears in her eyes, and said, I hate that this is the most honest thing you've ever said to me. There is no good answer to a sentence like that. We ended it quietly. No plates thrown, no screaming. Just the terrible adult version, where both people know the ending is right and still feel humiliated by it. 3 days later, the board heard Liliana's case. This time, I was in the room, not as family, not as a secret. As the outside specialist who had documented attempted archive intrusion, insider assistance, and coordinated pressure from a former spouse pursuing control through procedural manipulation. I laid out the evidence, answered the questions, and watched the room change shape in real time as Victor's polished narrative lost structural support. Then Liliana stood, and God, she was good. Not theatrical, not wounded, just exact. She acknowledged the breach, the internal compromise, the conflict of interest created by personal relationships around the company, and her own mistake in trying to contain too much privately at first. Then she did something I'll probably admire until I die. She refused shame. Not loudly, not as a speech, just as a fact. If my error was attempting to protect my daughter from collateral damage, she said, then I accept responsibility for that. But I will not step aside to make manipulation look like governance. The room went still. Victor lost, not dramatically. The board declined his motion, terminated Hannah's contractor ties, and authorized a formal restriction order on any further archival contact through his counsel. It was all very corporate, very measured, very polished, but it was still a loss. Afterward, people filtered out in waves until the hall outside the boardroom finally emptied. Liliana stood by the window, one hand resting lightly against the glass. I walked over. You all right? She let out a breath. No. I waited. Then she turned toward me. eyes bright, not with tears exactly, but with the exhaustion that comes after winning something you never should have had to fight for in the first place. "I'm relieved," she said, "and furious. And so tired I could sleep for a week." "That sounds about right." A small smile touched her mouth. I reached into my coat pocket and held out the building keycard she'd given me on day one. She looked at it, then at me. "What are you doing?" "Giving this back." "Why?" "Because if anything happens next," I said carefully, "it can't happen under emergency terms." She went very still. The boardroom corridor was quiet behind us. Evening light had gone soft and amber across the floor. Somewhere far down the hall, an elevator chimed. "You are an exasperatingly honorable man," she said. "I'm trying to be. That must be exhausting." "It is." That got another real smile. Then she looked down at the keycard in my hand and didn't take it. Instead, she asked very softly, "What if I don't want this to end with a returned badge and a thank you?" My heart kicked once, hard. I kept my hands exactly where they were. Still, visible. "Then I need to hear you say what you do want." Her gaze lifted to mine. "Dinner," she said. "In public. No secrecy. No family cover stories. No emergency." I nodded once. "Okay." "And Theo?" "Yeah?" "When you kissed me in your imagination during the last 2 weeks, did your conscience file a complaint?" I stared at her. She laughed, tired, elegant, and suddenly years younger than she ever let herself seem. "That's the face I was hoping for," she said. I should have been smooth. I should have had some line worthy of the moment. Instead, I said, "You are a menace." "And yet," she said, stepping 1 inch closer, "you're still here." She was right. So I asked the only question that mattered. "Can I kiss you?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Yes." It was not reckless, not hungry, not messy. It was the opposite of all the things that had made the last month feel contaminated. It was gentle, grounded, almost solemn. The kind of kiss that feels less like ignition and more like arrival. Like two people finally setting down the weight of being careful for all the right reasons. When we parted, her forehead rested briefly against mine. Then she took the keycard from my hand and slipped it back into my coat pocket. "Keep it," she said. "For what?" Her smile softened. "For dinner," she said. "And for whatever comes after. As long as it's honest." A month later, she introduced me at a small fundraising dinner, not as a consultant, not as a family friend, not as anything blurred or safe. "This is Theo," she said, her hand resting lightly at my back. "He's with me." Simple, public, clear. That was all I needed. Because real love, I learned, doesn't begin in the dark part of the hallway. It begins when the lights are